Welcome back to Crimson Chronicles, where we dive deep into the darkest corners of the human soul and the unsolved mysteries that have haunted America. Before we begin today's horrifying tale, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for joining me on this journey. Your support is what drives me to continue researching, writing, and bringing these stories into the light. If you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel and turning on the notification bell so you won't miss any future episodes. Every subscription helps the channel grow and allows me to dedicate more time to creating quality, in-depth, and detailed content like this. And don't forget to leave a comment and share your thoughts on the story once you've heard it. Today, we will plunge into one of the most chilling and shocking serial murder cases in American history, a killer who turned sweet lullabies into songs of death, spreading terror not only through a single city but across an entire nation. Join me as we trace the footsteps of the Lullaby Killer, a 3-chapter story of fear, loss, and an unrelenting manhunt. The autumn wind, a crisp harbinger of Boston's chill, whipped fallen crimson leaves across the cobbled streets of Beacon Hill, carrying with it the faint scent of wood smoke and a peculiar, unsettling silence. It was a silence that Detective Miles Corbin, a man whose face bore the indelible etchings of 2 decades in homicide, knew all too well. The quiet before the storm, the unnerving stillness that follows an act of profound violence. But this time, the silence was different. It carried a melody, unheard but deeply felt, a phantom tune that would soon haunt the city to its core. The call came in at 3:17 a.m., a welfare check on Sarah Jenkins, a seemingly innocuous request from a concerned neighbor who hadn't seen the vibrant young architect in 2 days, unusual for her meticulous routine. Corbin and his partner, Detective Lena Hansen, a sharp, observant woman barely half his age but with a mind as keen as any seasoned veteran, were the first to arrive. The brownstone, nestled on a quiet, tree-lined street, exuded an almost idyllic charm under the pale glow of the streetlights. Too idyllic, Corbin thought, for what waited inside. The front door was unlocked, a detail that immediately set off alarm bells. No forced entry, no sign of struggle. The apartment was immaculate, almost sterile, save for a thin layer of dust motes dancing in the faint light filtering through the blinds. Hansen, her hand already resting on the grip of her service weapon, moved with practiced caution, her eyes sweeping every corner, every shadow. Corbin, a bulky, grizzled figure, followed, his senses heightened, his breath held. They found Sarah Jenkins in her bedroom. She lay on her queen-sized bed, perfectly still, covered by a silk duvet. Her hands were folded neatly across her chest. Her long auburn hair fanned out on the pillow like a macabre halo. Her eyes were closed, her lips curved into a faint, serene smile. She looked, Corbin noted with a sickening jolt, utterly at peace. Too peaceful. "Oh my God," Hansen whispered, her voice barely audible. It was the details that screamed. The lack of a struggle, yes, but also the pristine state of the room. A half-eaten bowl of cereal on the nightstand, still fresh. A book face down as if she had just paused reading. And then, the focal point. A vintage music box, intricately carved with dancing cherubs, resting on a lace doily beside her head. It was playing a faint, almost inaudible melody, a delicate, repetitive tune that Corbin vaguely recognized as "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." The music, he realized with a horrifying clarity, had been playing for days. It had probably lulled her into her final sleep. Dr. Eris Thorne, the medical examiner, a man with a perpetually tired expression and an encyclopedic knowledge of death, confirmed their worst suspicions. Sarah Jenkins had been asphyxiated, expertly, without leaving a single mark on her neck. No bruising, no broken hyoid bone. It was as if she had simply ceased to breathe. The smile, Thorne explained, was likely a post-mortem phenomenon, an artifact of muscle relaxation. But the placement of the music box, the choice of the lullaby, the serene presentation, these were deliberate, chilling choices by the killer. "This isn't just murder, Miles," Thorne said, his voice grave, as he zipped up the body bag. "This is a statement." The media descended upon the quiet street like vultures. "Beacon Hill horror," screamed the headlines. The silent killer. The Boston Police Department, already stretched thin, found itself under immense pressure. Commissioner Hayes, a man whose political ambitions often overshadowed his investigative acumen, demanded answers. And Corbin, along with Hansen, was at the eye of the storm. For weeks, the Jenkins case remained an isolated, terrifying anomaly. The BPD threw every available resource at it. Forensics yielded frustratingly little. No fingerprints, no DNA not belonging to Sarah, no forced entry, no signs of a struggle. The music box was meticulously cleaned. It was as if the killer had walked through the crime scene without touching anything, or perhaps had cleaned everything with an obsessive precision. The only thing they had was the chilling tableau, the undisturbed peace of the victim, and the haunting melody. "He's like a ghost," Hansen mused one late night, staring at the whiteboard plastered with crime scene photos, red string connecting nothing to nothing. "He gets in, he does what he does, and he vanishes, leaving behind art." Corbin grunted, rubbing his temples. "Art, or a message. We just don't know what the hell it means." He kept replaying the scene in his mind. Sarah, the faint smile, the lullaby, felt like a perverse ritual, a twisted intimacy. 2 weeks later, the silence broke again. This time, it was in the bustling, diverse neighborhood of Roxbury. The victim, David Miller, a reclusive, elderly professor of linguistics from Boston University. Like Sarah Jenkins, he was found in his bed, seemingly at peace, hands folded. And beside him, a different music box, playing a different, equally well-known children's lullaby, Brahms' Lullaby. The city erupted. Panic began to spread like wildfire. 2 victims, seemingly unconnected, killed with the same chilling methodology. Sarah Jenkins, a young, ambitious architect. David Miller, an elderly, scholarly academic. No common demographic. No obvious links. The only connecting thread was the undisturbed crime scene, the lack of struggle, the serene post-mortem presentation, and the omnipresent, terrifying music box. FBI agent Evelyn Reed arrived from Quantico, a sharp, no-nonsense profiler whose reputation preceded her. She was a woman of precise movements and an unervingly calm demeanor, capable of dissecting the most heinous crimes with clinical detachment. Her eyes, however, held a flicker of deep empathy. "We're dealing with an organized offender," Reed stated in their first briefing, her voice clear and authoritative, slicing through the tense atmosphere of the incident room. "Someone intelligent, meticulous, and likely charming enough to gain access to his victims' homes without force. The lack of defensive wounds suggests either surprise, incapacitation, or perhaps a level of trust. Or, as I suspect, a method of entry that circumvents confrontation entirely." She gestured towards the crime scene photos projected onto the screen. The post-mortem staging, the folded hands, the peaceful expression, the music box, these are deliberate ritualistic elements. He's not just killing, he's creating a narrative, a final tableau. The lullabies suggest a desire for control, perhaps a perverted sense of comfort he's bestowing upon his victims. He sees himself, in some twisted way, as a bringer of peace, a shepherd guiding them to sleep. "We're looking for a male, likely in his late 20s to early 40s, highly intelligent, possibly with a background that allows him to appear non-threatening or even charismatic. He could be anyone." "So, what's the connection?" Corbin asked, his voice rough. "Jenkins and Miller, night and day. No obvious links." Reed paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. "That's the most disturbing part. The lack of an obvious link suggests his victims are chosen for reasons only he understands. Could be symbolic or purely opportunistic. But the ritual, the specific nature of the staging, points to a deep-seated pathology, a compulsion that is escalating. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation became a grueling, soul-crushing exercise in futility. Thousands of leads, tips, and potential suspects were run down, only to lead to dead ends. The city of Boston held its breath, fear a palpable entity in the air. Parents clutched their children tighter. Doors were triple locked. The simple act of going to sleep became an act of courage. Corbin found himself haunted by the lullabies. He heard them in the quiet of his own home, in the hum of the precinct, even in his restless sleep. He saw Sarah Jenkins's serene face, then David Miller's, an image that slowly began to merge into a single, terrifying portrait of the killer's perverse artistry. He was missing something, he knew it. A detail, a whisper, a shadow that connected the two disparate lives, something beyond the music and the staging. Hansen, ever diligent, was poring over old case files, looking for similar MOs, however remote. She cross-referenced every music box ever sold in Boston in the last decade, every antique shop, every craft fair. She analyzed the specific arrangements of the lullabies, searching for a unique signature, a specific composer or orchestrator. One evening, deep into another fruitless night, as the city slept uneasily under the shadow of the lullaby killer, Hansen called Corbin over to her desk. Her finger was tracing a line in an old academic journal that had belonged to David Miller. "Miles, look at this," she said, her voice low with a hint of discovery. "Professor Miller published a paper 5 years ago, The Subtleties of Folk Lullabies, a cross-cultural analysis. And Sarah Jenkins. She was part of the Beacon Hill Historical Preservation Society. They had just completed a renovation of the old Hawthorne Manor, a historic landmark known for its extensive collection of antique musical instruments, including a rare collection of Victorian-era music boxes. Corbin's eyes narrowed. A connection to lullabies, a specific cultural connection for Miller, and a historical connection to music boxes for Jenkins. "Yes," Hansen breathed, a spark of hope in her tired eyes. "It's tenuous, but it's a thread." Both victims, in their own unique ways, had an association with the very elements the killer uses. It's not just random. He's targeting them not for who they are personally, but for what they represent or what they were connected to. The lullabies aren't just a theme, they're the motive. He's not just singing them to sleep, Miles. He's silencing something. The echo of silence in Boston was about to get louder, and for the first time, Corbin felt a faint, chilling tremor of understanding. The killer wasn't just leaving a signature. He was leaving a message, and they had just found the first, faint, terrifying note. The hunt had truly begun. The revelation of the victim's tangential connection to the elements of the killer's ritual lullabies and antique music boxes infused the investigation with a renewed, if grim, sense of purpose. Agent Reed, her analytical mind whirring, immediately recognized the significance. "He's not just choosing random people," she emphasized, circling the new links on the whiteboard. "He's choosing symbols. Or perhaps he's correcting a perceived wrong. He's an intellectual killer, deriving satisfaction from the thematic resonance of his crimes. This elevates the sophistication of his profile dramatically." The task force, now a sprawling network of federal and local agents, plunged into an exhaustive search for anyone else with similar connections. Every musicologist in Boston, every antique music box collector, every member of historical preservation societies, every individual linked to traditional folk music or children's literature became a person of interest. The sheer volume of data threatened to drown them. Weeks bled into a month, then 2. The crisp autumn air had given way to the biting cold of a New England winter. The city remained on edge, but the absence of new victims, while a temporary relief, also created a suffocating tension. Was the killer satiated? Had he moved on? Or was he merely biding his time, meticulously planning his next act? Corbin felt the weight of the city's fear pressing down on him. His nights were plagued by fragmented dreams of smiling corpses and endless, looping lullabies. Hansen, usually so resilient, started showing the strain, her coffee consumption skyrocketing, her sharp wit dulled by exhaustion. The constant media scrutiny, the public's desperate cries for justice, and the commissioner's relentless demands for progress gnawed at their resolve. Then, the calm shattered. On a frigid Tuesday morning, just before Christmas, the most shocking crime yet was discovered in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac in Newton. The victims, Eleanor Vance, a beloved elementary school music teacher known for her work with children's choirs, her husband, Robert Vance, and their two young children, Emily, 7, and Ben, 4. The scene was pure horror. The family lay together in the master bedroom, carefully arranged in their king-sized bed, under a pristine white duvet. Eleanor and Robert were on either side, their children nestled between them. All four had the same serene, closed-eyed expression, their hands folded. And on each side of the bed, two antique music boxes, playing a harmonized version of Rock-a-Bye Baby. The small, almost imperceptible detail of two music boxes playing in sync, rather than one, sent a shiver down Corbin's spine. This was an escalation not just in victim count, but in the killer's meticulous, perverse artistry. "He's evolving," Agent Reed stated, her face pale but her voice firm. "The family unit, the children, this is a profound escalation." Eleanor Vance, a music teacher, deepens the thematic connection. "He's not just silencing individuals, he's silencing an entire lineage, a future. He's making a statement about the sacredness, or perhaps the perceived corruption, of innocence and comfort." The massacre of the Vance family plunged Boston into a state of collective trauma. The Lullaby Killer was no longer a shadowy figure targeting vague connections. He was a monster who had invaded the sanctity of a home, taken innocent children. The public outcry was deafening. Vigils were held across the city, tears shed, prayers offered. And behind the scenes, the pressure on the BPD reached an unbearable crescendo. Detectives Corbin and Hansen, now operating on sheer adrenaline and grim determination, buried themselves in the case. They revisited every single piece of evidence, every interview, every discarded theory. Hansen, with her technological prowess, created complex algorithms to cross-reference data points. Victim addresses, known associates, professional circles, online presence, even their preferred coffee shops. She scoured dark corners of the internet, searching for forums dedicated to lullabies, antique music boxes, or even perverse artistic expression. Corbin, meanwhile, returned to the fundamentals. He walked the crime scenes again, alone, late at night, letting the silence speak to him. He studied the faces of the victims, trying to understand what the killer saw in them. What made these specific people, these specific lullabies, click into place for such a twisted mind? One afternoon, staring at the complex web of red string on the whiteboard, a detail from the Vance family home niggled at Corbin. The two music boxes. They weren't identical. They were a matched set, exquisitely crafted, one slightly smaller than the other, suggesting a pair, perhaps even a mother and child design. He remembered seeing a similar set, vaguely, in an antique catalog that Hansen had compiled in her early searches. "Lena," he called across the bustling incident room. "That list of antique music boxes you compiled months ago. Did we ever follow up on shops specializing in match sets or family heirloom pieces?" Hansen, her eyes red-rimmed but sparking with renewed focus, quickly pulled up her spreadsheet. "I have a few, but most are out of state. Locally, there's Echoes of Time in the North End. They deal exclusively in high-end, rare antique musical items." "Get a warrant," Corbin commanded, "and run background checks on everyone who's bought or inquired about matched music box sets in the last 5 years, and anyone with a history of purchasing any of the specific lullaby-playing boxes we found at the scenes." The owner of Echoes of Time, a meticulously groomed man named Arthur Pendleton, was exactly the kind of individual Agent Reed had profiled, intelligent, articulate, almost excessively polite. He was in his late 30s, wore impeccably tailored suits, and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of antique musical instruments. He welcomed the detectives into his exquisitely curated shop, a haven of ticking clocks and silent melodies. Pendleton readily cooperated, providing detailed sales records and customer lists. He had indeed sold a matched set of Rock-a-Bye Baby music boxes, identical to those found at the Vance residence, approximately 6 months prior. The buyer? A man named Julian Thorne, a reclusive art collector from Cambridge. The name Julian Thorne immediately caught Corbin's attention. not because of a direct link to the victims, but because of its striking similarity to Dr. Eris Thorne, their medical examiner. A quick cross-reference revealed no familial connection, but the coincidence, however superficial, was enough to make Corbin uneasy. As Pendleton talked, his voice smooth and melodious, almost hypnotic, Corbin's eyes wandered around the shop. His gaze fell upon a display case, specifically showcasing a collection of vintage music boxes. One in particular caught his eye. It was small, made of polished mahogany, and featured an intricate carving of a sleeping child. Engraved on a small brass plaque beneath it were the words, "The Gilded Cage Brahms Lullaby." It was strikingly similar in style and craftsmanship to the music boxes found at the crime scenes. "That's a rather exquisite piece, Detective," Pendleton remarked, noticing Corbin's interest. "One of my personal favorites. A rare German import from the late 19th century. A true collector's item." Corbin picked it up, his fingers tracing the cold metal of the winding mechanism. "Do you have many duplicates of these?" Pendleton smiled, a fleeting, almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of his lips. "Only a few pieces from that particular artisan. Each unique, of course. But the style is quite distinctive." Hansen, meanwhile, had been quietly scanning the customer lists provided by Pendleton. Her eyes suddenly widened. "Mr. Pendleton, I see you also purchased one of the Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star music boxes around the same time as Ms. Jenkins bought hers." Pendleton's smile faltered for a microsecond, quickly recovering. "Ah, yes, that was for a personal project. I occasionally acquire pieces for my own collection or to study their internal mechanisms for repair work. It's part of the trade." Corbin set down the music box, a cold dread seeping into his bones. The pieces were starting to fit, but not in the way they had anticipated. He remembered Agent Reed's profile, charming enough to gain access, a bringer of peace, sees himself as a shepherd, and Pendleton, with his smooth voice, his impeccable presentation, his profound knowledge of lullabies and music boxes. He fit the profile chillingly well. "Mr. Pendleton," Corbin said, his voice hard, "we're going to need to take all of these records and this music box back to the precinct for further analysis. And we'll also need you to come down to answer a few more questions." Pendleton's calm facade finally cracked, just a fraction. A flicker of something cold and calculating appeared in his eyes. "Of course, Detective. Anything to assist the investigation. The lullaby killer has been a great sorrow to our city." His words were polite, but his gaze held a chilling intensity that sent a shiver down Hansen's spine. As they left the shop, the bells above the door tinkling softly, Corbin felt a surge of grim certainty. They had found their cradle's shadow. The lullabies weren't just being played. They were being composed by a master manipulator who understood the power of a gentle melody turned deadly. The hunt was far from over, but the elusive ghost of the lullaby killer now had a face and a name. And that name was Arthur Pendleton. The interrogation room was a sterile box of cinder block and fluorescent light, a stark contrast to the elegant ambience of Arthur Pendleton's antique shop. He sat opposite Corbin and Hansen, impeccably dressed even after hours of questioning, his composure unervingly intact. Agent Reed observed from behind the one-way mirror, her expression a mix of analytical focus and quiet intensity. Pendleton maintained his innocence with practiced ease, his answers flowing smoothly, devoid of wavering. He explained away his purchases of the specific music boxes as professional curiosity or personal collection, backed by receipts and meticulous logs. The discrepancy in the Vance family music boxes, the specific set he had sold to Julian Thorne, was also explained. Thorne, he claimed, was a reputable client who had collected several match sets over the years. "I understand your suspicions, detectives," Pendleton said, his voice calm, almost sympathetic. "Given my profession and my interest in these specific artifacts, it's only natural. But I assure you, my only connection to these horrific crimes is the shared sorrow of a city under siege." Corbin leaned forward, his voice a low growl. "Where were you on the nights of October 12th, November 1st, and December 19th, Mr. Pendleton?" He rattled off the dates of the Jenkins, Miller, and Vance murders. Pendleton provided alibis vague but plausible. A solitary evening at home, absorbed in restoration work. A late-night auction in upstate New York, which he could not immediately verify but offered to produce paperwork for. A long drive to visit an ailing relative, a journey he often undertook alone. Each answer was a brick in a wall of plausible deniability. Hansen, however, had noticed something subtle. Each time Pendleton mentioned the victims or the specifics of the crime scenes, a minute flicker in his eyes, a barely perceptible tightening around his mouth, betrayed a deeper knowledge, an almost proprietary interest beyond that of a concerned citizen. He spoke of the victims with a strange, clinical detachment, yet with an intimacy of detail that went beyond what had been publicly released. "Mr. Pendleton," Hansen interjected, her voice deceptively soft. "You mentioned the specific artifacts. How did you know the music boxes were artifacts, not just objects? The public reports only referred to them as music boxes. We specifically used the term antique only in our internal communications." Pendleton paused, a beat too long. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, quickly masked. "My apologies, Detective. Given my profession, I naturally assumed they were antique. It was merely an educated guess. An educated guess for 3 separate, unique antique music boxes used in 3 distinct crime scenes, each playing a specific lullaby?" Corbin pressed, seizing the opening. "That's quite a guess, Mr. Pendleton, especially considering the details of the Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star box found at the Jenkins scene and the Brahms lullaby box at the Miller scene were never released to the public. Only the fact that they were music boxes playing lullabies." Pendleton's composure began to fray at the edges. His gaze hardened. I must have read it in a more detailed, perhaps leaked news report, or heard it through a police contact. Boston is a small city, detectives. The lie was thin, almost transparent. Reed, watching through the glass, nodded slowly. He knew too much. The charming facade was cracking. Corbin then played his ace. "We've been investigating your online activity, Mr. Pendleton. Specifically, your anonymous postings on obscure true crime forums. Under the handle, The Sandman. You've written extensively about the psychological impact of lullabies, the concept of peaceful transitions, and the idea of correcting disharmony through symphonies of silence. You've even mused about specific antique music boxes and their ideal uses." The blood drained from Pendleton's face. The charming smile vanished, replaced by a mask of cold fury. "Those are academic discussions. Theoretical. Freedom of speech. Are they, Arthur?" Corbin retorted, using his first name, trying to break through the carefully constructed persona. "Or are they your twisted manifesto? Your rehearsals for murder? Your blueprint for becoming the lullaby killer?" Pendleton slammed his hands on the table, the first crack in his control. "I am a connoisseur of fine music, detective, a purveyor of beauty. I bring solace and peace to my clients. Not death." Suddenly, a realization struck Corbin, a chilling echo from the profile. "You don't just sell music, Arthur, do you? You collect it, you curate it, and you believe you're correcting it." Professor Miller's paper on disharmonious folk lullabies. Sarah Jenkins's work with the cacophony of modern architecture over historical preservation. Eleanor Vance's attempts to modernize children's choir classics. You saw them as corrupting the purity of the very lullabies you cherish. Pendleton stared at Corbin, his eyes burning with an almost messianic fervor. His voice, now devoid of its previous smoothness, was sharp, brittle. "They desecrated it. They bastardized the sacred melodies. Miller sought to dissect their innocence, Jenkins to bury their history under soulless steel, Vance to distort their purity for fleeting trends. I merely restored the balance. I guided them to the purest form of sleep, a sleep unburdened by their discordant influence." He wasn't confessing in the traditional sense. He was articulating his warped ideology, his grandiose delusion. He believed he was an artist, a righteous purifier, not a killer. At that moment, the door burst open. Agent Reed, her face grim, rushed in. "We have a problem, detectives. Julian Thorne, the man Pendleton said he sold the Vance music boxes to. He just reported his entire antique music box collection stolen from his Cambridge home, including a matched set of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star music boxes and a rare Hush Little Baby box." Corbin's blood ran cold. Thorne hadn't just reported a theft. He had inadvertently confirmed Pendleton's lie. Pendleton hadn't sold the Vance music boxes. He had stolen them from Thorne. And the mention of a Hush Little Baby music box sent a horrifying premonition through Corbin. "Arthur," Corbin said, his voice dangerously low, "you're not done, are you? There's another one. Who is it?" Pendleton just smiled, a chilling, triumphant grin that spread across his face, revealing the depth of his madness. "The symphony is not yet complete, detective. There's one more discordant note to silence. One more soul to guide to the truest peace. A final lullaby for a city that has forgotten the beauty of silence." Hansen, quickly cross-referencing recent victimology data with the newly revealed lullaby, Hush Little Baby, and any recent public figures associated with children's literature, gasped. "Dr. Eris Thorne. The ME. He's been publicly critical of using lullabies as a means of pacification in child psychology, advocating for more active engagement. His upcoming book, The Awakened Mind, Beyond the Lullaby, is due out next week." The realization hit them like a physical blow. The Julian Thorne alibi was a deliberate, cunning misdirection, using the similarity to Dr. Eris Thorne's name to throw them off. Arthur Pendleton wasn't just a killer. He was a master manipulator playing a deadly game of cat and mouse, with Dr. Thorne as his final, symbolic target, the man who dared to challenge the very premise of the lullaby itself. "Go!" Corbin roared, leaping from his chair. "He's going after Thorne. Now!" They raced against time, sirens wailing through the frigid Boston night. Dr. Thorne's address in the secluded suburbs of Concord was a 45-minute drive. Pendleton had a head start, perhaps hours. The thought of their trusted ME, the man who had looked into the faces of all Pendleton's victims, becoming the next tableau, spurred them to a frantic pace. When they arrived at Dr. Thorne's isolated home, the scene was eerily familiar. The front door was ajar. A faint, almost imperceptible melody drifted from within. "Hush, little baby." Corbin and Hansen burst in, weapons drawn. The house was dark, save for the faint glow emanating from the master bedroom. They moved stealthily, each step agonizingly slow, the lullaby growing louder, more sinister, with every step. They found Pendleton in the bedroom, illuminated by the soft light of a bedside lamp. Dr. Thorne lay on his bed, still, serene, his hands folded. But Pendleton wasn't finished. He stood over Thorne, a small, intricate music box in his hands, adjusting its mechanism, a look of profound satisfaction on his face. He held a small, wickedly sharp antique letter opener, poised to complete his ritualistic staging. "Freeze! Pendleton! Drop the weapon!" Corbin's voice boomed, shattering the peaceful melody. Pendleton turned slowly, his eyes burning with an almost otherworldly calm. He didn't drop the letter opener. He simply smiled, a private, intimate smile meant for no one but himself and his final victim. "Such a shame, detective," he whispered, his voice as soft as a lullaby. "You were almost too late." The melody needed its final harmony. As he moved, a blur of motion, towards the still figure of Dr. Thorne, Hansen fired. A single, precise shot to Pendleton's shoulder. He cried out, the letter opener clattering to the floor, his music box falling and shattering with a jarring crash, silencing the melody. He crumpled to the floor, bleeding, his eyes still fixed on Dr. Thorne's body, a look of profound disappointment on his face. Corbin rushed to Dr. Thorne. He was alive barely. The killer had been interrupted mid-ritual, moments before completing his final act. Thorne was unconscious, likely drugged, but his chest rose and fell with a faint, ragged breath. He had been spared the final, chilling touch of the lullaby killer. Pendleton was apprehended, his twisted symphony finally brought to a jarring halt. The city breathed a collective sigh of relief, though the scars of his reign of terror would forever remain. The trial was a media circus, Pendleton's chilling testimony about harmonizing discord, painting a terrifying picture of a sophisticated, delusional mind. He was convicted on all counts, sentenced to multiple life terms, ending his reign of peace behind bars. In the aftermath, Boston slowly began to heal. The fear receded, replaced by a cautious return to normalcy. But for Detectives Corbin and Hanson, and for Agent Reed, the echo of the lullabies would never truly fade. They had looked into the abyss, hunted a monster who found beauty in death, and brought him to justice. Yet, the question lingered: what creates such profound darkness? What turns a gentle melody into a broken song of despair and terror? The Lullaby Killer case closed, but the memory of Arthur Pendleton, and the chilling, peaceful smiles of his victims, would forever remain a stark reminder of the fragile line between beauty and horror, and the terrifying power of a broken melody.